Hey guys, welcome to book review number 34, 35. Let's get straight into it. The book I'll be reviewing today is Kashmir, Roots of Conflict, Paths to Peace. Right there. By Sumantra. I don't know if it's Bose or Bose, but Sumantra Bose. Anyway, this was a book on the Kashmiri conflict between Pakistan and India, and also independence factions within the regions of Kashmir, which also I should say includes the subregions of Jammu and Ladakh, I believe it's pronounced. Let me look that up real fast. Ladakh. Yeah, Ladakh. But anyway, I should say, my opinion, this was kind of a hard book to read because it was a pretty dry book. It primarily had to do with the politics and the political factions within the country. That being said, once you got into see how the power plays were made between the various factions, it became more interesting. If I were to classify it, I would definitely not call it like a travel book. It was more like a modern history book. Yeah, that's the correct way to say it. It's like a history book, except it deals with modern circumstances. For those of you that don't know, Kashmir is a disputed territory between India and Pakistan that has a significant independent feeling within or independent movement within the territory itself as well. The way it kind of happened was, as you know, India and Pakistan, as well as like Bangladesh, used to all be part of something called British India, which was a British territory. Now, if you know anything about the demographics of India, it's primarily a Hindu country with a very significant and vocal Muslim minority. So when the country gained its independence, or when the territory gained its independence, I guess you'd say, it was essentially split into two, what would later become three countries. Those countries being Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. India being the overwhelmingly largest country, and also primarily Hindu country with significant Muslim minority. But Pakistan and Bangladesh were set aside as primarily Muslim countries. And this led to one of the largest migrations, kind of separations in world history, and has continued to foster problems. And of course, Pakistan and India. I really won't be focusing so much on Bangladesh because that really wasn't the importance of this book. But Pakistan and Bangladesh continue to have general conflicts between the two nations. But one of the hot points is the region of Kashmir and Jammu, the majority of which is controlled by India, a subsection, I'd say maybe 20 to 30%, including the northern areas, I guess you'd say, is controlled by Pakistan. Now the reason this is, I should say that also all of Kashmir, except for the very southern parts of the Jammu region, even say 50% of the population in the Jammu region is Muslim. Kashmir is Muslim. Jammu is about 50-50 between Hindus and Muslims. But the reason that the Kashmir region, the vast majority of which was controlled by India after the partition of these two countries, was because there were these things during the British rule called the princely states, and basically, when India gained alliance, the countries that were, or the territories within India that were controlled directly by Britain were either directly absorbed into India or into Pakistan, whereas the princely states were almost exclusively absorbed into India, but sort of like secondary because they were viewed as more independently controlled rather than directly controlled by Britain, so it took some more time to include them in. Well, the region of Kashmir and Jammu was a princely state, and its leaders were actually Hindu, even though the vast majority of its population was Muslim. So, of course, when it came to ceding territory to a national government, the Hindus naturally went to the Indian side. And kind of what's happened since then is an evolution of oppression by the Indian government, of any sort of populist sentimentality towards government by the people. Now, there are elections, but as Sumantra Bose mentioned in this book, because elections rely upon the general electorate agreeing upon a nationality in which to vote for. So if there are elections within Kashmir, either for their own state government within the Indian territory, or representatives to the Indian national government, if people don't agree that that's a territory, then they will feel no reason to vote and will become galvanized towards independence, let's say. And so what essentially happened is, I'm not going to go through all the books because that's where it actually gets kind of dry and this review would go on forever. But over the course of time, as India continued to not recognize either Kashmiri independence or Kashmiri ascension into Pakistan, the people became more and more galvanized towards extremist acts. Someone called them terrorist acts. And some of them were terrorist acts. I mean, just going after civilians or improvised explosive devices. It's a very hard region to travel in. Across the Kashmir Valley. And there were times that the Kashmiris were allowed slight amounts of independent rule and not so much, but in general they weren't allowed it by the Indian government. Like, it was all sort of like puppet regimes and stuff. Now, one thing that Kashmir Bose mentioned is the natural sort of inclination of the people might be towards independence or joining Pakistan, but one of the problems with this is the huge Muslim or a huge Hindu minority within Jammu, which is kind of like a sub-region of Kashmir. Also the Tibetan Buddhist minority within the lightly populated regions of Ladakh. He also mentioned that among the Muslims, the people within the Kashmir Valley itself, so that's like the big fertile area where the majority of population is, actually aren't pro-Pakistani, and they don't share the same language as the people of Pakistan. Even though they're both Muslim, they're certainly not a singular bloc. Whereas people on the outer rings of the valley that live sort of as herders up in the mountains have another, even though they're Muslim, have another ethnicity. And for example, within the Jammu region, it's majority or slight majority Hindu, but the Rajouri region, I should get this right, the Doda region, I should say, and the Rajouri region, basically like the northern parts of the Jammu. Jammu is to the south of Kashmir and is closer to India, whereas Kashmir is up towards the north, further away from India. But in this mountain areas in the northern half of Jammu, close to Kashmir, there's significant Muslim minorities. So you can't really split the valleys between Kashmir and Jammu and have Jammu join India and Kashmir join Pakistan. And it should also be mentioned that while Pakistan has generally been less oppressive than India of the democratic leanings of its people, or the populist I shouldn't even say democratic because they're not really necessarily democratic, but the populist leanings of its people, it's kind of used that to cynical ends, in that this Pakistan here won't recognize any sort of independence movement either within India-controlled Kashmir and Jammu, or the small sliver of region that they control, which is called the AKJ. Yeah. No, ADAZ, Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, which is Pakistani-controlled Kashmir, which is a much smaller territory. But because both Pakistan and India essentially are locked in the word he used was maximalist political viewpoints, they couldn't negotiate. Now at the end of the book, he sets a precedent, largely using the precedent of the North Ireland peace talks, about how while the current border between the current control of Indian Kashmir and Jammu should remain in Indian hands, and the current border of Pakistani Kashmir and Jammu should remain in Pakistani hands, that they could essentially not recognize the exact political line of either's territories, but could move towards democratic representation within them. And he said one of the keys to this was that, so let's say the administrative region of Kashmir controlled by India, Jammu controlled by India, would elect a parliament, or would elect its own government within the Indian system, and would elect representatives to the Indian parliament. Pakistan would be allowed to send ambassadors to observe and interact with these people. The same as vice versa in the elected territories of Azad, Kashmir, and Jammu. That Indian representatives would be able to be sent to the Pakistani parliament on issues particularly pertaining to that region. Now, this isn't representatives related to all issues between India and Pakistan, but specifically issues within the Indian parliament related to Kashmir and Jammu. Pakistan would have a say, or would have a hand in that. If not a controlling hand, at least an observing and opinionated hand, and vice versa. Another thing he mentioned was that sovereignty of both territories, but particularly Indian-controlled Kashmir and Jammu, should revert to more autonomous rule. And one of the big things India states is no other territory within its realm has autonomous rule. So therefore, Jammu and Kashmir shouldn't be granted that right, because it would just fracture the entire country, would have other regions break off. But one of the things that he mentioned was that most of the other regions did not ascend to Pakistan, or ascend to India in the independence era the way that Kashmir and Jammu did. And actually there were documents of autonomy when the ascendance to Indian rule happened, that India has largely ignored those documents, but those documents still exist. So you wouldn't be creating a new precedent, you'd just merely be following the precedent that was already agreed upon. As I said, I don't think I'm going to go any further. Like I said, it's pretty dry. You don't really get into too much on the street stuff, or on the street stuff you do get is directly related to like elections and stuff. And so you see a little bit of like the repression, and also a feeling that politics is just so strong in this area that it's hard to almost live a daily life without the politics kind of coming in, affecting life. But anyway, like I said, it's the only, not Jammu, but Kashmir is the only Muslim majority province or district within all of the Indian territories. And do I know what the answers are? I don't particularly, but I hope for the sake of the Kashmiri people, I hope for the sake of these two nuclear armed countries, Pakistan and India, that things don't necessarily have to come to a conclusion, but that essentially the killing can go down. You know, one of the things that they mentioned from Pakistan, I'll say this real quick and then I'll wrap it up, is that Pakistan actually would send people into Kashmiri India under the guise of independence fighters, when really what they were members of the Pakistani military, specifically members of the Pakistani, Secret Service, or the equivalent of the Pakistani CIA, to act as independence fighters, when really what they were just instigators to the Pakistani cause. So I hope that just the total violence between the two countries, the cynicism, I hate to sound like an old hippie, but I guess I just wish the violence would go down, that it doesn't necessarily have to come to a conclusion, but that there would be some sort of return to normalcy within the lives of the Kashmiri people, even if those people, be they on one political side of the faction or another political side of the faction, even if they can't get everything that they want, that there's some sort of normalcy within the region, and a degree of normalcy between the two countries to the degree that it can be. So anyway, Kashmir by Sumantra Bose, Roots of Conflict, Paths to Peace. I enjoyed it. It's a little dry, but it's good. So recommended. All right. I'll have some more of these later. Bye, you guys.